Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, welcome to Victory Monday. The Chargers have taken down the Atlanta Falcons in one of the most bonkers games that I've seen in a long time. Wasn't that game nuts? Just filled with things that I haven't seen maybe ever, or if that, very rarely. And the Chargers somehow found a way to come away victorious in this one. And again, I think this is a good sign, Bolt fam. We've needed some good news in regards to the team for a couple of weeks now. That bye week, we were hoping to see a lot more. It did not develop. The injuries, definitely a downer. But a victory like what we saw on Sunday is definitely something that the Chargers can build on, and that the Bolt fam in particular really needed in order to move forward. Because let's be honest, it has not been the smoothest start to a season that we've seen as Chargers fans. But it's certainly at a point right now that the Chargers can work with it in trying to build success towards the end of the season. So we got a lot to talk about in today's video. Lots of fun news to go over, and some scrappy plays by this team in grabbing that victory. And all in all, just take a very well-deserved collective sigh of relief. We're back on track, kind of. At least we've bought ourselves some time, and the Chargers fans can once again start looking towards maybe the optimistic point of view in terms of maybe the Chargers picking up the pieces as time does go on. So before we do get started, guys, quick shout out to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Of course, Monday Night Football tonight. This is what I'm thinking, Bolt fam. Jackson, Dalton, Kamara, and Lutz. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comment section below. And if there's any other players you guys would like to highlight, be sure to use code DIRECTOR when signing up to get a match deposit up to $100. Code DIRECTOR. Before we do get started, Bolt fam, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at Falcons post-game report here in Week 9. Definitely one of those games that I'm going to remember for the wackiness, the bonkerness, and how the Chargers got away with the victory here. Some would say that the Falcons out-chargered the Chargers in the most Falcon way. And that's where we are today, man. 5-3, a win is a win. Be it an ugly win, the Chargers do move forward in terms of that win column. And again, 5-3 is a lot better to work with than 4-4 at this point of the season, especially as the Chargers have already passed their bye week. So a lot to work with there. Let's go over with some of the stuff that we have seen in this game and some of the stuff that we can move forward with on here. Now, this first segment is going to be called a scrappy victory. And this is something I talked a lot about in terms of last week with the Chargers and our mindset moving forward. This team needs to become that scrappy team while they're waiting for their stars to return. Of course, Joey Bosa is just around the corner. Mike Williams around the corner. Both of those guys, at least by my calculations, seem to be back at some point between weeks 11 and 13. As the Chargers are about to go into week 10, the waiting period is starting to shrink. And as the Chargers do continue to become more healthy, their odds at defeating opponents like the Kansas City Chiefs in week 11, and of course more division matchups down the road, become that much more likely. This scrappy mindset, I think, is something that's healthy for Chargers fans in terms of our expectations in the next couple of weeks, as well as maybe the team mentality itself. You're going to have to figure it out on the fly. Being down so many wide receivers, so many stars all over the roster, including the J.C. Jackson and Joey Bosa, all that kind of stuff, you're going to have to sort that out on the fly. And sometimes that's just going to come through pure instinct on game day. And the Chargers did seem to figure it out on Sunday. And again, maybe that's a bit uncharacteristic. Maybe Chargers fans are used to, that scrappy win being, the remarkable way we found to lose. In this case, the Chargers found a remarkable way to win. Luck has certainly been on our side since the injuries have been piling up, but that is the mindset I'm trying to feed into my own psyche, as well as maybe some of the Bolt fam, in order for us to try and find some peace with the situation here. Now, despite being the most banged up team in the league, this is going to be the situation the Chargers have to overcome. We saw something on Twitter the other day called a bus score, which I think is the banged up score, right? BUS. And the Chargers at number 32 in terms of healthiest team in the league, certainly have to find a way. I put a tweet on Twitter with Jeff Goldblum saying the Chargers found a way, and that's exactly the kind of mindset maybe we might need next week as well, as the Chargers do move on in 5-3. We have a chance, but 5-3 is certainly something that we can work with. Again, like I said, it looks a lot better than 4-4, and time to heal, time to get back up to 100% is going to be the Chargers' biggest point of emphasis moving forward. Bosa, Mike, Keenan coming back, hopefully here in the next few weeks, is going to give the Chargers a closer resemblance to what we saw maybe at the top of the season, where the hype was at career highs, I should say, franchise highs. The Chargers going all out in the offseason. It definitely came crashing down with all the injuries. And as we do get guys back, we should start to resemble that team just a little bit more. So a scrappy victory, and one that does count in real football terms towards the win column, and gives us something to work with at 5-3. Next up, the state of the wideouts. Now, this was probably the biggest narrative going into this week was, Chargers, what are we going to do about the Chargers wide receivers? What's Justin Herbert going to do out there? Is he going to be throwing to, practice squad guys? Going to be throwing to guys, fresh off the Uber squad? What is going on here? Well, of course, we did find out about Josh Palmer coming back from concussion protocol. He was active this game, and this was certainly one that the Chargers were excited to try utilizing versus a secondary of the Atlanta Falcons that was extremely banged up. And of course, what we thought happened absolutely happened. I felt that we were going to see perhaps a 100-yard game by Joshua Palmer, or at least a touchdown game by him. And of course, he did put up those kinds of numbers. I think ending the game with around 109 yards. Now, I would say that this was an extremely valiant effort by Josh Palmer, despite the drops. The Chargers, if you were to give one solid criticism in their Week 9 performance in terms of the wide receivers, it's going to be those drops, man. Justin Herbert was absolutely putting that team on his back, trying to fight for every yard, every, conversion. And the wide receivers, including the tight ends, were not helping so much in terms of the dropped receptions. In position, found a way to get the ball to those playmakers, and they just were not able to come down with it. Now, more often than not, Josh Palmer found himself on the opposite side of the coin, coming down with clutch catches, clutch third down conversions, and keeping drives alive. And that's something that Chargers fans, myself included, saw in terms of, his upside once we did draft him. The Chargers know that he's going to develop into something very special going forward, but getting thrusted into that limelight as the wide receiver 1 in Week 9 definitely helps my confidence in that development going forward. It was a very good performance. He still has things to work on. He's got to work on, securing those catches and finding ways to get open. But in terms of all that responsibility being put on his shoulders, he did a great job in utilizing that opportunity, giving Justin Herbert the best possible chance in trying to go and win that game. So great effort by him. Also, we do have to mention DeAndre Carter. Now, I'm hoping, with every, setback is a lesson that can be learned. The Chargers down so many wide receivers. They had to utilize DeAndre Carter more often this week than maybe they would otherwise in situations they have Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, etc., etc. What we learned with DeAndre Carter is that he can be, in some ways, that burner that we need. Now, again, he's not a burner. I would say he's a fast wide receiver, but definitely not a burner. He ran a 4.44. Of course, he's a bit on the older side, so who knows how that speed translates nowadays. But the Chargers were able to utilize that speed aspect of his game to try and stretch the field a little bit, and that's something that I pounded the table for in our preview. We've got to get defenses to back off a little bit, and we saw early, especially in the first couple of drives for the Chargers on offense, that the Atlanta Falcons were certainly not respecting the deep ball. They were playing very close to the line of scrimmage, and as Justin Herbert and DeAndre Carter worked together to stretch the field, we saw that narrative change throughout the game, and that's something that we can use going forward with a guy like DeAndre Carter, if not him himself. I feel like this also very much so speaks to the point that the Chargers need more speed on this roster, whether it be, a first-round caliber pick kind of player or somebody a little bit more buried on the depth chart like at 4 or 5. They need somebody they can utilize in situations like that to better open up the offense for their other playmaker receivers, including those tight ends. Lastly, a little bit of a nod to Michael Bandy. He had a couple of nice clutch plays in there. He was mostly quiet this week, but he stepped up when necessary. And I would say this gives the Chargers wideouts an overall grade. I would give him like a B- this week. Sure, it wasn't the best performance, but with what the Chargers had to work with, it definitely could have been a lot worse. So big nod, number 5's in the chat to our guy Josh Palmer for leading the charge there and giving the Chargers the best opportunity to win under the circumstances. Speaking of receivers, we have to give a nod to the tight end as well. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of criticism towards Gerald Everett for a hugely costly, dropped pass right over the middle of the field that I think ended up stalling that drive completely. Those criticisms absolutely warranted. But I also have to remind the Chargers and its fans that Gerald Everett is quietly one of the more solid tight end signings that we've had in a long time, previous of Hunter Henry. Of course, we had Antonio Gates for the longest time out there too, but it's really tough to come off of two really, high elite caliber tight ends and try and figure it out along the way with guys like Jared Cook and Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett, to me, has been a solid signing, and he did make quite an impact on this game. Of course, when you're missing so many wide receivers, utilizing your tight end is definitely not a bad idea. And I saw a couple of things that the Chargers did that made me feel, for lack of better words, proud of his utilization, finding the traits that are strong in Gerald Everett and trying to put him to the test on game day. And probably the biggest one would have been his yak ability, those yards after contact, lowering that, shoulder and finding a way to pound through for that extra yardage. And he certainly put that to the test on Sunday, as we saw how many broken tackles, how many attempts where, the Falcons were right on top of him and he still pushed forward for 5 extra yards at some points. That was quite impressive. Even up to the points where some of the plays that were annoying me, like designed tight end screens, those were starting to find some success. And I think that's the Chargers' way of identifying the true strengths of a guy like Gerald Everett and how they can utilize him moving forward. Again, with every setback is an opportunity to learn. And the Chargers certainly, in having to utilize these other weapons like Gerald Everett and DeAndre Carter, are maybe getting a better idea of how to utilize them fully going forward into the future, even when we do have guys back like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And that's something to keep in mind going forward with Gerald Everett. That ability to generate yards is certainly going to come into play later, and it's something that you're going to want to utilize. So Gerald Everett quietly having, let's say a career year for himself, a couple other big games, and I think he's certainly going to have post his best yardage and touchdowns of his career. I would say he's turning out to be a solid signing and definitely was one of those guys to credit for the Chargers win on Sunday. Lastly with the receivers and the quarterback. Let's talk about the quarterback a little bit, Justin Herbert. Now, I understand the criticisms. There's been a lot of, I would say, general NFL fans outside the Chargers fandom that have been blowing a lot of smoke in Justin Herbert's direction, blowing a lot of, criticisms in his direction, saying, is he a fraud? All these things that would truly offend Chargers fans after the first couple of seasons of Justin Herbert truly proving himself. And I feel like even with Justin Herbert not putting up the most spectacular stats on Sunday, he did show why he is elite and why those criticisms should be put to rest. Of course, there are things that Herbert can do better, and, being so young in his career, he's going to improve going forward. But the things that we saw on Sunday in an effort to win, in an effort to put his team on his back and find a way to grab victory from the jaws of defeat, shows me that Herbert really is the real deal and does absolutely prove that the Chargers are right to continue investing in him in terms of his weapons and, of course, his payday coming up here in the next year or so. Now, he's going to need some help, however. I feel like, again, at the top of the season with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, things looked a lot better, especially in terms of protection with Rashawn Slater in there as well. And it felt like he was primed to go out there and really do what he's been doing the last couple of seasons. At this point right now, with so many uncertainties as far as wide receiver and stuff, it's very, very obvious that we don't want to squander the opportunity we have with Justin Herbert by not supplying him the proper weapons. And yes, I think health is something you have to start taking into effect right now. As many other teams in the NFL that load up at wide receiver, they have contingency plans in place. We do like Josh Palmer, we do like DeAndre Carter, but when you're in a situation like we're seeing in 2022 where all your stars are going down, I think this makes those midseason signings that much more important. Because like we saw on Sunday, Justin Herbert, the huge amount of drops that he had to overcome, the huge amount of lack of play calling that he had to overcome was much more than you should be putting on the plate of any quarterback in the NFL. Providing him good weapons and good play calling going forward is going to be a must, and hopefully the Chargers, if they don't receive the news that they're looking for in the terms of the return of Mike Williams and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, they're definitely going to need to find a way to supplement that with a wide receiver signing very soon, because Herbert, if anything, again, proved everybody wrong in terms of his ability to go out there and win games despite these setbacks. Play calling extremely lackluster to start the game. Wide receivers, health was non-existent. He stood tall and found a way. And the elevation factor was absolutely in play when it comes to what he had to work with. We talk about elite quarterbacks and their ability to take what they have in front of them, even if it's not the best situation, and elevate those players to a spot where they can bring us victory. And Justin Herbert absolutely did that with Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, Gerald Everett, and something very noteworthy to bring up. So Justin Herbert, still elite. He's just going to need some more help going into the future with some moves, hopefully, by the Los Angeles Chargers. Next up on the offense, the unstoppable Ekeler. What more can we say at this point of the season, man? Austin Ekeler, 10 touchdowns throughout 8 games in 2022. He might arguably be the biggest success of the Chargers in 2022 so far this season. Absolutely unreal. And again, with a team that, boasts so much talent in its history, especially, highlighted by LaDainian Tomlinson in the running back position, Austin Ekeler really is standing out. He's well on his way to another 20 touchdown season for the Chargers, which again, back-to-back seasons is unheard of throughout the league. And it's almost unfair when you line up Austin Ekeler, in the ways that the Chargers have been utilizing him. Again, if we're going to give one positive criticism to Joe Lombardi, is that he's done a very good job in utilizing Austin Ekeler in the same way he wanted to utilize Alvin Kamara with the New Orleans Saints, and that's translated very well. Other things still need a lot of work, but the Austin Ekeler experiment has certainly paid off, and he continues to be one of the most valuable assets on this offense and on this team as a whole. Now, he totaled 71 yards and 2 touchdowns on Sunday, and it's almost coming to the point where it's like, this is just what Austin Ekeler does. Multiple touchdowns. If not, he's getting, nearing 200 yards, sometimes both. It's ridiculous out there. And he continues to be one of those guys that if you're a Chargers fan, you're tuning in on Sundays to see what number 30 is going to do out there, to watch him go to work. And so long as he can stay healthy, again, knock on wood, this offense should continue to have a shot behind Justin Herbert and Austin Ekeler in terms of scoring, because he certainly is one of the most unique weapons in the NFL, and he really is proving it out there, including his awareness. I did want to give a nod to that one play that ended up getting called back. Austin Ekeler getting tackled in the flat, rolling over the defender, getting up and running straight to the end zone. It seemed that it was a touchdown for a solid 5 minutes there, was it not? And it's not something that's super common in the NFL for an NFL player to have that kind of awareness to say, hey, I wasn't down. I'm getting up and I'm bolting towards the end zone. Even the Falcons defenders were just kind of standing around like, what's going on? As Ekeler went in for the score. Now, of course, that was called back just barely by the slightest touch of the elbow on the turf. But that's the kind of player that Austin Ekeler is. He's never going to take any opportunity for granted, and he's going to try to make the most of every situation. So one of my favorite players in the NFL, Austin Ekeler, continues to strive, and I do believe that he's probably the best fantasy player the last couple of years back-to-back, and he'll continue on that trend this year. Now, speaking of running back, we do got to give a nod here to Isaiah Spiller as well, who I think is starting to become primed into the RB2 position as of right now. Of course, Joshua Kelly down with injury a couple of weeks ago. We don't know when he's expected to return. We were hoping to see more from Sony Michel than we have. This week was about Isaiah Spiller getting that shot at RB2, and I think he definitely put up some, I wouldn't say great numbers, but a performance that shows that he can carry drives. And that's extremely important. Not crazy yards, but those were tough yards that we needed in the times that we handed him the ball. I also think that, again, Sony Michel at this point may have had his job taken away by number 28, who outsnapped him 2-1. I think 14 carries for Isaiah Spiller to 7 carries, or I should say touches, for Sony Michel. And I do feel like we saw exactly what we were hoping to see in Isaiah Spiller in those opportunities. Big potential for tough yardage work going forward for number 28. We handed him the ball up the middle, and we needed those tough 2-3 yards, and he did deliver several times. Even on those first down situations, the Chargers have been a really tough first down team in terms of generating necessary yards to get the run game going. Well, on first down this week, we saw plenty of opportunities given to number 28 that generated decent yards. I'm talking 4 or 5 yards, and that is something that the Chargers have sorely lacked. Now, at the top of the season, post-draft, we talked a lot about this being the role of Isaiah Spiller, but he just hasn't been given the opportunity. This week, that narrative definitely changed, and we did see that opportunity given to 28, and I felt very confident in what he did put up for us. There is still one factor left to be seen with Isaiah Spiller, however, and that's going to be that pass-catching ability, which actually adds more excitement towards more involvement of Isaiah Spiller in the future. This guy was one of the best pass-catching backs in the draft, and he has crazy skill in that aspect. I feel like as we continue to see more trust given to number 28, that pass catching opportunity is going to come as well. And I do believe, it's going to be a very tough battle when JK comes back, Joshua Kelly. Joshua Kelly, absolutely unquestioned the number 2 running back for the Chargers when healthy. But I do feel like seeing the potential of Isaiah Spiller on game day and watching him prove the things that we were hoping to see at the top of the season, this is going to give him some more opportunity going down the road. If anything, I think it's bad news for Sony Michel, who may at some point get benched permanently, maybe even added to the practice squad. I don't know what his narrative's going to be going forward, but it really does seem like Isaiah Spiller has grabbed that opportunity by the horns. Lastly, for the offense, Dicker the kicker. It's kind of crazy to see the Chargers kicking narrative change in the last, 5 seasons. Of course, Michael Badgley, it was up and down for a long time. The Chargers get Dustin Hopkins. Things are looking really good. He goes down. We get that backup in Tyler Burlett. He goes down. And then we sign this guy, Cameron Dicker, off the street, who was getting ready for a Carrie Underwood concert at the midpoint of the season when he got the call from his agent, steps up and helps the Chargers win this game. 2 of 2 field goals, 2 of 2 extra points, one of those field goals being the game-winning score right there, and that's pretty big. I mean, Chargers fans, we're getting pretty lucky. Of course, if you've been a fan a long time, you know the woes when it comes to the kicker position. This is something the Chargers seemingly have been able to figure out, and they were putting him in pretty good positions to go out there and find success. Just huge nod to number 15. Of course, some people were like, 15, isn't that Jalen Guyton's number? I don't know how it works. He's on the IR, but number 15 as of right now, Cameron Dicker, went out there and definitely helped the Chargers grab a victory on Sunday. Now let's get into a little bit of the defense. Not as much as the offense this week. With the defense, there's a couple of really big things I wanted to highlight and a couple of things that I hope the Chargers can improve on. But one of them, Mack Attack is back again this week with one of the biggest highlight plays we're going to see of the season. You cannot talk about Week 9 versus the Atlanta Falcons without talking about the Khalil Mack strip fumble and return. That was insane. For anybody that happened to miss it, which I'm sure you've seen it all over Twitter on replay by now, Khalil Mack on an effort after Marcus Mariota got a pass away to Drake London, hustled over to Drake London, grabbed put his arm through the grip of Drake London and tore the ball out and started running the other way. I don't know if I've really ever seen anything like that. Of course, I think in my time watching football, maybe I've seen it a couple of times, but maybe not even with the Chargers. That is absolutely unreal. That ball wasn't just stripped. It was taken. It was took. And he goes sprinting the other way. Now, of course, the Chargers squandered that opportunity with the interception, that being one of the biggest criticisms of Josh Palmer this week. But what a highlight play for Khalil Mack, and one of those plays that really justify the move this offseason. I'm hoping signings like Khalil Mack and risky moves like going after big names like that can provide value to your offense helps prove to the Chargers and give them the confidence to make more moves like 52 going forward, because he's been one of the best reasons to tune in on Sunday if you're a Chargers fan. This defense, especially since the absence of Joey Bosa when he went down, this is one of the biggest reasons to watch defenses, to see what number 52 is up to that week. Him, Derwin James, Drew Tranquill, these guys have certainly stepped up and given the Chargers defense at least something to stand on in terms of big playability at any given moment. And Khalil Mack certainly proving to be worth it this offseason. With that play this year, that's going to be one that's burned into my memory until I die. As a Chargers fan, that number 52 play is going to stand the test of time in terms of my memory. Now, speaking of great players on defense, a Tranquill Derwin experience is this segment. And you know what? This is a very familiar concept to Chargers fans, is it not, in terms of linebackers? Last year, we talked a lot about Kaiser White really stepping into that role and giving the Chargers a lot of value at the linebacker position. We kind of know how that narrative turned out, right? He wanted to go to the Eagles. Huge loss for the Chargers this offseason. Well, this year we're kind of seeing a similar situation with Drew Tranquill. Now, I do know that Drew Tranquill maybe not as slept on as Kaiser White in his career. Tranquill is certainly a very well-respected name among the Chargers fans, but this year in particular, he is stepping up into one of those, star linebacker players for the Chargers that they really needed in this particular scheme. He's taken that job, he's taken that opportunity, and he's really shown the Chargers that he's not only a value, but an elite talent at the position. Yes, he got trucked by Cordero Patterson on that touchdown, but at the same time, you cannot ignore what he did throughout the entirety of this game. He's unbelievable in all facets of playing the linebacker position. He's turned into a very nice blitzing inside linebacker. Of course, he's been incredible in coverage. I think he logged an interception, I think in even the week 1 versus the Raiders, and he's been spectacular in run defense for the most part. This is why I bring up the Kaiser White situation as well, though, because we're going to have to pay Drew Tranquill this offseason, and I don't want to make the same mistake we did with Kaiser White. Drew Tranquill certainly has earned the trust of this team, the trust of me, and I'm certain the trust of a lot of Chargers fans as well. We need to start thinking about what it's going to take to keep Drew Tranquill on this roster, because he's certainly turned into, I would say, an elite linebacker for this team and really alleviated a lot of concern Chargers fans had going into the season with what are we doing at linebacker. He's been absolutely fantastic. Now, on the other side, Derwin James, hasn't he turned into exactly what we hoped he would be at the top of the season, right? Utilized everywhere. That highlighted piece on the defense that you can trust pretty much at every level on the field. We saw a play where he lined up. It may have been in the slot or the X position, kind of depending on where you see it, where he blitzed from the edge of that line. And my goodness, man, this is where you find the talent of Derwin James being irreplaceable. Being able to utilize him in a situation like that, trust him with coverage over the middle, over top, at corner, doesn't matter. He was an absolute beast on Sunday, and he was a big difference maker at several points. I think that sack led to a stop for the Chargers, maybe even a score afterwards if I'm not to be mistaken. Either way, big sack for Derwin James. I think a couple tackles for loss as well. He's been absolutely fantastic, and yes, even with the injuries that we've seen this season, the Derwin James experiment this year of how to properly utilize him and get him all over the field, I would call a success. So that's been very nice to see for the Chargers. It's one of the highlights that you can talk about of the defense so far. But what about some of the criticisms, Director? Well, there is one glaring issue with the Chargers defense that I'm sure a lot of Chargers fans will agree with me on, and that's going to be the run defense. Now, we're going to show Marcus Mariota on this slide, but keep in mind Tyler Algier, who went nuts, Cordero Patterson, who went nuts, and then, of course, the quarterback who did, rush quite a few times this game as well. It's been bad. And to add on top of that, the Chargers lost, arguably, in my opinion, the best run defender they had on that line in Austin Johnson. And we still don't have word on what's going on with him, at least at the point of recording this video. But I don't know if we'll be getting him back anytime soon. And that's a big issue. I do feel okay about the Chargers' depth in terms of running the run defense, but at the same time, that's going to be a tough loss because the Chargers' defense already was really struggling versus the run this season. I would actually view Austin Johnson in terms of his run defense similar to Linval Joseph. Like, it wasn't good those years. It was pretty tough, but he was certainly the best among the Chargers defensive linemen at the time. And losing, Austin Johnson's definitely going to be felt going forward. This run defense has been pretty pitiful. I'm not going to lie. It's very much so, torn open in Week 9 versus the Falcons. They were just running unpunished. There was this one drive where literally I think they handed it off like 9 out of 10 times. And the Chargers maybe stuck in a bad formation, couldn't get off the field for subs. It was just painful to see the Falcons just run unpunished, unchallenged, all the way down the field that drive, and that did result in points. And that's something that the Chargers have to figure out. The Falcons totaled, I think, over 200 yards on the ground. Not much through the air, but that just goes to speak that you don't need to have a good air attack in order to attack the Chargers on defense right now. That run defense is that bad, and it's something that the Chargers and Brandon Staley are certainly going to have to figure out going forward because, like a couple seasons past, it could end up being the downfall of this team in the future. You've got to sort out the run defense. A couple seasons going in now, it's something that must be addressed at this point. Finally, the coaching continues to struggle. Now, I feel like maybe myself and other Chargers fans becoming a bit overcritical of Brandon Staley as the season goes on because we have seen a lot of mistakes these past couple of years that maybe cost us the playoffs last year and possibly cost us games this year. I'm starting to have a more keen eye for these mistakes just to kind of stack up what my actual opinion is on Brandon Staley maybe going into 2023. Now, in this game in particular, yes, the Chargers got away with the victory, and I think for the most part, Brandon Staley called an okay game. Maybe not so much even defensively, but it was enough to get the victory. I did spot a lot of mistakes this game, though, that does make me a little bit worried going forward. There was that one play where the Falcons, they were trying to switch, they were trying to make, I don't know if they're making subs or if they're moving players around. It was actually Cordero Patterson moving from receiver to line or to running back. and the clock was about to strike 0. And for some reason, Brandon Staley elected to call a timeout because, of course, it went from like 5 wide to something with a running back there. And that freaked him out, and he wanted to change his formation. But at the same time, you just saved the Falcons a delay of game. That's something that I don't know if I would do even under pressure, and it's something that's an obvious mistake, and that's on the shoulders of the head coach. The defensive play calling, in my opinion, was actually pretty poor. Mainly, I would say mainly the reason that the Chargers didn't struggle more was due to bailouts by Marcus Mariota overthrowing his wide open targets. We saw several instances where Kyle Pitts maybe had to go free touchdown, where he maybe had a free first down with their wide receivers getting open. He just plain out overthrew him. And that just speaks to the coverage that we saw in those games, right? It worked versus the Chargers defense. Their players just were not able to execute. And that's something very concerning. As, Brandon Staley does assume full control of the defense, and we're seeing, offenses and opponents kind of carve us up. Not even carve us up, but find, unlimited success on the ground. And it's pretty bad. And that long drive by the Falcons that I was talking about in terms of them just running it over and over and over again, that was as a result of subbing issues. Being able to sub out players is probably one of the basic things that you have to do as a head coach, right? One of the basic responsibilities. And we just weren't able to figure that out for some reason. I know they continue to drive and we continue to have to move down the field, but there's got to be at some point a plan put in place to get those subs done efficiently and quickly. Maybe even call a timeout if they're continuing to, it was something like a 75-yard drive. If they're not finding any success in stopping it, maybe try and use one of those timeouts. Either way, I don't know. I just felt like the coaching side of this game very much so struggled again. The play calling from Joe Lombardi was pitiful to start the game. He did kind of figure it out going down the line. But, do we have time for him to figure it out in future games? When we play the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 11, are we going to have time for that first quarter to kind of be wasted in terms of let's get our footing? I don't know. And that's why I feel like the coaching continues to be an issue that the Chargers and its fans need to monitor. Now, lastly, the last segment here. The Falcons out-chargered the Chargers in the most falconing fashion. Somebody said that the Falcons feel like the Chargers of the NFC, and that's absolutely warranted. This was the most bonkers play I think I've seen in a long time, right? The last play of almost one of the last plays of the game late in the fourth quarter, Austin Ekeler positioning us for a game-winning field goal, fumbles the ball. Falcons pick it up. They start running the other way, and their defender just flat out drops it. Chargers recover, and they would end up having to drive just, 20, 25 yards downfield to get the game-winning field goal anyway. What is happening? And this was after we saw the Mack strip fumble return. This was after we saw the Ekeler rollover almost called a touchdown. Double fumble trouble to close the game. This was nuts. This was just a crazy circus of a game, and it was kind of crazy to witness, and luckily the Chargers walked away victors. But the one thing I wanted to highlight on this play in particular, you know who the hero was of that play? Why the Chargers likely didn't fumble this game away and lose in the most Chargers spectacular fashion possible? On the fumble return by the Falcons, Justin Herbert and his hustle ran to the sideline, and as the defensive lineman made eye contact with Justin Herbert, he panicked. He thinks in his head, is that Justin Herbert coming after me right now? Is that 6'6" tower beast of a quarterback about to lay me out? And he straight up dropped the ball. I think Steve Hagling put it the best way on Twitter. He saw the wrath of God in that man and dropped the ball, dude. Put the fear of God in that man. Absolutely insane, dude. So huge ups to Justin Herbert, who likely saved the game with that effort. And what a mental mistake there by the Atlanta Falcons to close that one out. So my bottom line with this one, guys, the Chargers did get a win here. And again, there's that spectacular play there with Khalil Mack. Chargers did get away with the win here. They are 5-3. And this is something that the Chargers can work with, okay? 4-4 definitely doesn't look as good as 5-3. And as the Chargers continue to get healthier, our chances at defeating more, let's say, prestigious opponents does become that much more likely. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joey Bosa, those are guys that make huge differences on any football team. And have those guys back, let's say, within the next 4 or 5 weeks, maybe even sooner than that, it's going to be a very, very big deal. I actually was meaning to say like 2 to 5 weeks, something like that. It's happening sooner than later. The Chargers need to be that scrappy football team right now and find a way to win. And they did just that on Sunday. Hopefully by next week, we do see a signing or the return of Keenan Allen or good news on Mike Williams, something to help out Justin Herbert. But we need to be that team that's scrappy enough to grab a win from the jaws of defeat. And if the Chargers can continue that trend, maybe move on to 6-3, 5-4 is maybe something you can still work with, but at this point, still second place in the AFC West. Still a great shot at the playoffs, and they hopefully, with the health returning to their squad, should be a considerable opponent in the playoffs if they can continue just to figure out a way to win. You guys let me know in the comment section below what your record prediction is going to be for the Chargers. I think mine dropped to 9-8 at one point. With this victory, I think it's certainly going to grow to 10-7, and that is definitely something you can work with going into the postseason and hopefully grabbing one of those spots. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Leave your thoughts about this victory in the comment section below, and if anything, bask in Victory Monday and Victory Week, because we can forget about our Chargers problems at least for the next 5 or 6 days. As of right now, the Chargers are victors, and they are finding a way to figure it out and grab the win. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. That Khalil Mack play, who would ever guess?